November 2nd, 1805. It has been a year since that cursed night, yet the memories remain fresh, as if carved into my very soul. The tooth around my neck swings with every step, its weight a constant reminder of what I have become. A hunter, a reaper of monsters. My scythe, now sharpened to a deadly edge, rests across my back, a loyal companion in my dark endeavors. I arrived at the village at dusk. The air was heavy with fear, the kind that clings to the skin and makes every shadow seem alive. As I walked down the dirt road, faces peeked out from behind shuttered windows. Mothers pulled their children aside, and the men avoided my gaze. They fear me as much as they fear what lurks in the darkness. Perhaps by now they are wise to do so. One man dared to approach me. His face was lined with sorrow, his hands rough and calloused, a farmer like I once was. He did not shy away but fell to his knees before me, gripping my coat with trembling hands. Tears streaked his weathered face as he begged for my help.
"Are you here for the monster? They say it's a Strigoi,"
he whispered, his voice thick with despair.
"He took my boy, a child of only 8 winters, dragged him from his bed in the night. I heard his cries, but by the time I reached him, only blood on the floor."
His words struck a chord deep within me. A child taken by a creature of the dark, just like before. The man continued, his voice breaking.
"It comes from the cave in the hills. During the day, they say it sleeps. But please, you must kill it. Avenge my boy. Save the rest."
I knelt to meet his gaze, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "I'll see to it," I said, my voice steady. "Show me the way to this cave." The man hesitated, his eyes darting to the shadows, as if the mere mention of the Strigoi would summon it. But eventually, he nodded and pointed toward the hills that loomed over the village like silent sentinels.
"It's there,"
he murmured.
"But be warned, it is no ordinary beast. It's cunning. It hungers."
I stood, adjusting the scythe on my back. I've dealt with monsters before. This one will fall like the rest. As I turned to leave, he grabbed my arm.
"You don't understand. It's not just its strength. It knows us. It whispers our names. It haunts us. It's like a demon."
His words sent a chill through me, I hate to admit, but I kept my expression calm. "If it bleeds, it can die," I said firmly through the weight of his warning, settled uneasily in my chest. The villagers watched from their windows as I strode toward their hills, their silence heavy with both hope and dread. The tooth around my neck swung with each step, a promise in the curse. I would face this Strigoi, just as I had faced the demon from the sky. But in my heart I knew this hunt would test me in ways I was not yet imagined. The cave stood before me like the gaping mouth of some great beast, dark and jagged, its edges slick with moss and age. I hesitated at the threshold, the stench wafting out so thick it seemed to cling to my skin. It was a vile mixture of musk, decay, and something sharper, metallic, like blood left to rot. Pulling the cloth from my satchel, I tied it over my nose and mouth, though it did little to stave off the assault on my senses. My boots crunched as I stepped inside. the sounds echoing through the cavern like brittle whispers. I looked down and saw the first of them. Bones, splintered ribs, broken femurs, shards of skulls. They weren't all animals either. Among the twisted remains of stags and wild boars were unmistakably human skeletons, their pale forms stark against the dark, damp ground. Skulls stared up at me with hollow eyes, accusatory, as though blaming me for being too late. As I ventured deeper, the light from the entrance faded, swallowed by the oppressive darkness. The air grew colder, heavier, each breath an effort. The lantern cast flickering shadows along the walls, revealing horrors at every step. The remains weren't limited to scattered bones. There were bodies, or what was left of them. Some slumped against the walls, others lay sprawled across the floor, their skin drawn tight over the brittle bones. Mummified, their faces frozen in masks of terror. Each body bore the same mark. 2 punctures, blackened and crusted with dried blood, sat just above their collarbones. The sight turned my stomach, but I pressed on. The scythe slung across my back as a reassuring weight. If this creature had a heart, I'd find it and carve it out. The stench grew worse the deeper I went, the air thick with coppery tang of spilled blood and sweet sick rot of death. My foot caught on something soft, and I stumbled, the lantern swinging wildly. When I looked down, I saw it. A tattered shoe, no larger than one of my own children might have worn. My chest tightened. Beside it lay a broken doll, its porcelain face shattered, its one remaining eye staring up at me. I clenched my teeth, forcing the rising bile back down. There was no room for hesitation, no room for fear. The cavern opened into a wider chamber, its floor uneven and slick. In the far corner, illuminated by the flicker of my lantern, was a grotesque mound, a nest of sorts. Bones, shredded clothing, and tufts of hair piled together in a mockery of a throne. Above it, bodies hung from the jagged ceiling like grotesque trophies, their heads lolling to one side, throats torn open and drained. I froze, the weight of this place pressing down on me. This wasn't just a lair. It was a slaughterhouse, a temple of hunger and cruelty. I could feel the tooth around my neck, cold against my chest, a reminder of the beast I'd slain before. But this was somehow different. Then I heard it, a faint sound from deeper within, a shift of something massive, slow, deliberate. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting. I gripped my scythe handle tightly, its blade catching the faint glow of the lantern. My heart thundered in my chest, but I steadied myself. Fear was a luxury I couldn't afford. "This ends now," I whispered, stepping forward into the black, toward whatever horror waited in the shadows. As I swept the lantern's light toward the roof of the cave, the beam faltered, catching on something that sent a ripple of unease down my spine. At first, I couldn't make sense of it. It was massive, pale and faintly glistening, like leather stretched too tightly over a frame. The surface seemed to twitch in the lantern's glow, folds shifting ever so slightly as though alive. Then, in a single, horrifying moment, the thing moved. The leathery expanse unfurled, revealing colossal wings, translucent in places where the thin veins pulsed with a sickly red glow. They stretched wide, filling the chamber, their span monstrous and alien. My breath caught as I saw the wings conceal a twisted, nightmarish figure that defied reason. It was vaguely human, but only in the cruelest mockery of the form. Its elongated limbs jutted out at unnatural angles, each ending in clawed digits, as long daggers. Its torso was gaunt, ribcage protruding beneath its skin so pale it seemed to glow. The head was worse, a hideous fusion of man and monster, with a flat bat-like nose that twitched as it sniffed the air. Its ears were long and pointed, swiveling toward me like a predator honing in on prey. When it opened its mouth, rows of jagged, needle-like teeth glinted in the lantern light, each stained dark with old blood. My heart thundered in my chest as its black, soulless eyes locked onto me. I barely had time to move forward before it lunged with impossible speed, the air filling with the rush of massive wings and the guttural, otherworldly screech that made my very bones vibrate. The clawed hand caught me in mid-step, wrapping around my torso like a steel vice. I was slammed against the cavern wall, with such force that the air was driven from my lungs. Pain exploded through my back, and my head swam as I struggled to focus. The lantern slipped from my grasp and shattered on the ground, plunging us into an uneven flickering light as the oil flared and sputtered. I could feel its claws tightening, sharp points digging into my flesh. It tilted its head, inspecting me with an intelligence that was colder and crueler than anything I'd encountered before. For a moment, I was paralyzed, caught in the overwhelming presence of something so profoundly wrong, it threatened to shatter my resolve. Gasping for air, I felt the creature's claws tighten further around my chest, squeezing the fight right out of me. My vision blurred as I reached down desperately, fingers fumbling toward the blade stuck in my boot. Just as the creature reared back, preparing to strike with its needle-like teeth, I found it, a silver letter opener, small but sharp. Summoning every ounce of strength, I drove it upward into the leathery flesh of its hand. The reaction was immediate. A piercing, inhuman shriek filled the cavern, reverberating off the walls and shaking loose small stones from above. Its grip faltered, and I fell to the ground in a heap, clutching my ribs and struggling to breathe. The creature recoiled, cradling its hand where the smoke rose from the wound. Its gaze snapped back to me, black eyes gleaming with malice and something more sinister. Amusement.
Many have tried to kill me,
It rasped, its voice guttural, a wet snarl that grated like stones grinding together. It reached down and plucked the skull from the scattered remains at its feet, turning it over as though inspecting a bauble.
but no mortal can ever hope to do such a preposterous thing.
With a slow, deliberate motion, it crushed the skull in its clawed hand, fragments falling like grains of sand. I forced myself to my feet, clutching the scythe in trembling hands as the creature loomed closer, its form monstrous and fluid in the flickering light.
You will soon join them.
It hissed, lips curling back to reveal those rows of blood-stained teeth. In a flash it lunged, wings unfurling with a deafening rush of air. I threw myself to the side, narrowly dodging the creature's charge. Its claws scraped against the rock, throwing up sparks as it pivoted with unnatural grace, readying for another attack. This time I did not wait. Gripping the scythe tightly, I swung with all my strength, the blade gleaming as it arched through the air. It struck true, cleaving through the creature's arm with a sickening crunch. The severed limb fell to the ground, twitching grotesquely as dark ichor-like blood sprayed from the stump. For a moment I dared to hope. But then the creature left, a low, guttural sound that grew into booming, maniacal cackling.
You think this is enough to stop me?
It jeered, the severed arm already beginning to writhe. The dark ichor bubbled and seethed, tendrils of sinew reaching out to reconnect with the wound. Within moments, the limb began to reform, sinew weaving itself back together in an obscene mockery of life. Panic welled in my chest as the creature flexed its newly regenerated claws, stepping forward with slow, deliberate menace.
Your weapons are nothing. Your effort meaningless. This is my domain.
I tightened my grip on my scythe, my mind racing. If severing a limb wasn't enough to kill it, I needed to find another way. Pain seared through my back as the creature's claws raked across me, a blow so quick I barely saw it coming. The force sent me sprawling to the ground, the edges of my vision flashing white as agony tore through my body. I clenched my jaw against the scream building in my throat, but a guttural shout escaped anyway as I rolled away, clutching the hilt of the scythe for dear life. The creature loomed over me, licking the blood from its talons with a sickening slurp, its long-for tongue darting between jagged teeth.
You are refined flavor, little hunter.
It crooned mockingly, its voice twisted mix of glee and hunger.
I will at least give my thanks for delivering me such a delicious meal. The farm boy was little more than a morsel.
My chest heaved, rage bubbling like molten fire in my veins. The image of that farmer, the father who had pleaded with me to end this nightmare, flashed in my mind. His son, his boy, reduced to nothing but food for this abomination. My grip on the scythe tightened as the fury coursing through me overshadowed the pain. "You will pay for that!" I growled through gritted teeth, pushing myself upright as the creature bent low, preparing for another strike. It lunged, claws poised to tear me apart, but this time I was ready. I ducked low and swung the scythe in a wide arc, the blade slicing cleaning through both arms in a spray of dark, ichor-like blood. The beast shrieked, its dismembered limbs falling to the ground with a sickening thud. But I did not stop. As its grotesque stumps began to twitch, already starting to regenerate, I surged forward, my scythe cleaving through its legs with brutal swipes. The creature crumpled, its wings splaying as it collapsed in a heap. But its laughter, guttural and venomous, cut through the air.
What arrogance do you have in mind?
It roared, eyes blazing with fury as its wounds began to knit themselves together.
I will always heal from these tiny cuts. You cannot.
If I cannot kill you, I snarled, cutting off the taunts as the pieces of a plan began to form in my mind. I can still deliver you to something that can. The creature's eyes narrowed in confusion, the cold intelligence in their depths faltering for the first time.
What nonsense!
It began, but it didn't get time to finish. Gripping the scythe with both hands, I swung it upward, embedding the blade deep into the creature's chest. It howled in rage and pain as the weapon sank into its flesh, pinning it to the ground. Without a second thought, I grabbed the handle, hauling it and the writhing beast upward. Every muscle in my body screamed as I dragged it toward the mouth of the cave, its claws flailing uselessly as it struggled to regenerate its severed limbs. The sunlight was ahead, its golden rays spilling into the cave and illuminating the shadows. The creature's thrashing grew more frantic, its eyes widening as the realization dawned.
No! Stop!
It bellowed, its voice breaking with panic as the sunlight grew closer.
What do you think you're doing?
I did not answer. My rage had boiled over, my only focus on the light and justice it promised.
With a final, desperate heave, I hauled the creature into the sunlight, its horrific screams echoing through the cavern as its flesh began to blister and burn. With one final guttural scream of defiance, I heaved the writhing monster fully into the sunlight. The instant the golden rays touched its pale leathery skin, the creature convulsed violently, a shriek tearing from its throat so piercing it made my ears ring. Its limbs, half regenerated and clawing for purchase, twitched and flailed in desperation as its flesh began to smoke and sizzle.
No! Stop this!
It bellowed, thrashing with a strength I could barely contain.
You cannot do this to me! I am eternal!
I gritted my teeth, every muscle in my body burning as I held it there, refusing to let it slither back into the darkness only to heal. It twisted and writhed, its claws raking the air mere inches from my face. The snow beneath us began to melt as the sunlight did its work, the creature's screams growing weaker, more frantic, until they dissolved into a pitiful, gurgling whimper. Its body began to crumple before my eyes, skin flaking away to reveal sinew, then bone, then nothing but ash. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the remains of the once mighty monster into the ether. Within moments, it was gone, the cavern and the forest falling silent as if the creature had never existed. Panting, I leaned against the scythe, staring at the patch of ground where it had died. My chest heaved, my breath misting in the cold air. Overhead, the sky stretched wide and blue, the morning sun bathing the world in its cold winter light. Kurva, I muttered, my voice hoarse as I let the tension drain from my shoulders. That was rough. My legs finally gave out, and I collapsed into the snow, the cold seeping into my bones. I didn't care. I was alive, battered and bloodied, but alive. For the first time in what felt like hours, I let my eyes close, the scythe laying beside me in the frost. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a quiet promise of peace. For now, at least.